I saw a recent survey here, just came out. It was published by RNS. Canadian researchers are revisiting a hotly debated sociological question. Why do some churches decline while others succeed? And they go on to say, the riddle of mainline death has been solved, they said, Well, it strikes me that there's not really a riddle, but I'm happy they found it. The project served more than 2,200 churchgoers from Anglican, Presbyterian, Lutheran, and United Churches. This is in Ontario, Canada. They say what they found was most clergy and the congregants of the declining churches blame changes in society for drop in demand for religion. We hear that a lot. But comparing the religious beliefs and practices of both the declining and growing churches, Haskell said more clergy and congregants of the growing churches held firmly to quote-unquote traditional Christian beliefs and were more diligent in practices such as prayer, Bible reading. That includes a more literal interpretation of the Bible, greater openness to the idea that God intervenes in the world, he said. Now, that seems self-evident to us, but they seem to be highly surprised by these facts. What do you think?
Well, I'm glad they discovered it, but I think, essentially, if people stick to Orthodox teaching, let's face it, Jesus already promised that the Holy Spirit was going to reinforce that in the believers. So if people are actually sticking to what Jesus said, they're trying to remain faithful to the word that as he gave it, if they're trying their best to follow that word, the Holy Spirit is just going to pour grace all over the place on that particular religion or that particular group of religious people, and if the Holy Spirit does that, their congregations are going to increase. This is not surprising to me. And if people are essentially just kind of conforming themselves to the whims of the culture, and they're not willing, in a sense, or our church is not willing to be countercultural, not willing to allow Christ to stand out as countercultural, calling us to a religious norm and a moral norm that is beyond the culture and sometimes very much contradicts what the culture says is good or happiness, then it doesn't surprise me that's going to go into decline, because I just don't think the Holy Spirit can sustain it. And if the Holy Spirit isn't sustaining it, what spirit might be, I don't know. But I can tell you one thing: I don't expect those kinds of congregations to grow very quickly. I do expect that the others will, and of course that's been the finding too in Roman Catholicism throughout the world. Obviously you have to adapt, to certain kinds of questions that this show concerns itself with all the time. So, we have to talk about faith and science. It's a huge topic. We can't just let it go. We don't let it go. This is, one of our big topics here. We have to talk about, church teaching and anthropology. And of course, we talk about it here. Why do we talk about it here? Because it's completely consistent with Orthodox Christian teaching. You don't have to be anti-scientific to be an Orthodox Christian. I hope we've established that by you don't have to be anti-scientific to believe in a soul. You don't have to be anti-scientific to believe in God. There's plenty of evidence for God from contemporary physics. Plenty of evidence for the soul, as we'll be seeing in today's program, from all kinds of scientific studies. And there's all kinds of evidence for believing in Jesus Christ from a scientific point of view, like the Shroud of Turin and the application of recent historical evidence to the resurrection of Jesus. And of course, if we compare all these things, it's pretty clear, that science and faith are completely consistent. So we need to get that word out, but we certainly don't need to compromise anything in Orthodox Christian teaching, like the Trinity and the Incarnation, which we'll talk about next week. But also, we don't need to compromise, things like the moral teachings of the church, which are, in fact, the moral teaching of Jesus. So, for all intents and purposes, there's complete consistency. That word needs to get out there, because a lot of kids are being deceived by the media, who tells them the opposite. Faith contradicts science or something. We're right, you're wrong. That is just simply a false contradiction, and that needs to be dealt with. But the actual finding, as you put, no shock here.
Right,
You know, I
exactly,
mean,
right.
pretty much what you'd expect the Holy Spirit to be doing according to the rules of discernment of St. Ignatius Loyola and St. Paul. So I think we're on really solid footing.